All right, what's going on YouTube? I have a slightly different video today, and that is because I want to start doing some series on this channel. I feel like the kind of content I've been putting out, snippets from class and then me explaining sort of what I was going for in them is good, and I'm going to keep that up, but I want to spice it up a little bit and just give more information, right? I think I have a lot more information to give, and rather than try to only show it when it comes out in class, which I can't always capture because I'm not always recording, why not just make video series, right? So that being said, as you read from the title, this is the How to Write an Essay video series. Now, I'm going to take a slightly different approach than just, okay, here's how you write a thesis, here's how you write introductory sentences, yada, yada, yada. I want to go deeper than that, and I want to break it down much more, right? I want to talk about, which I'm going to talk about in this video, sort of the issues that I've noticed with why kids can't write essays, right? And the reason why I'm doing this series is because students have a horrible time writing essays. They're not good at them. I've read students on the elementary, middle, high school, college level, and they all seem to struggle with the same sort of issues, right? Of course, you have your kids who can put their thoughts into words pretty succinctly and eloquently, and great for them, right? But for the majority, they cannot, right? And I've worked in multiple schools now. I've read hundreds and hundreds of essays, and this is sort of my thoughts on what I've noticed. And these are some of what I'm going to teach you guys in these videos are some of the solutions and the tips and procedures that I've taken to help fix and improve on students' essays, and they seem to have worked, or I wouldn't be making this video. And again, that's totally biased, but you'll have to trust me, I guess. Right, so, like I said, what is the point of this video? Schools have failed students, right? They cannot write essays whatsoever. Grammatically, they're terrible. Kids have a hard time explaining their ideas. They can't write a thesis. They can't keep structure and flow and stay organized in their essays, right? So that's the main thing, right? And when I say schools have failed, that sounds a bit extreme, right? I'm not blaming the teachers. I'm more so just sort of blaming the public school system. As someone from New York City, we have, I believe, the most populated public school system in the country, right, in America. So, it's hard, right? How do you develop a system of how to teach kids how to write essays, right? How do you teach 25, 30 kids, right, in one go? It's impossible. Everyone's got little issues they need to work on, right? I'm going to get into more of that later, right? But that being said, doesn't matter who we point the finger at, the issue still remains, right? Then they get to college, and college professors have no time, and they don't play around. You got to know how to write an essay. And if you don't, you're going to fail, right? So for all the kids going to college, which is a lot, we need to help them out, right? And that's what I hope to do in these videos. So one of the things I noticed, teachers assign essays, assuming that students know what to do, but they don't. And they don't teach the fundamentals. And kids don't actually know how to write one, right? So a teacher says, you have an essay to write, and maybe they do a couple mini lessons, review on a thesis or this or that, but it's not enough, right? They have too much of an expectation and an assumption that these kids have a background in these things. And even though they probably should, because you go through it and you learn as the years go on, it's not sticking, right? So that's one issue I've noticed, right? And where did it come from? I don't think that's necessary to even think about, right? I said we could blame just the situation itself, right? As we know, the American school system's not the best, right? We can't seem to agree on anything, right? Depending on where you live and what your tax bracket is, schools are going to be more funded, right? So an inner city public school is going to be terribly underfunded as opposed to a public school, let's say on like the Upper East Side of Manhattan, right? That being said, there's a big discrepancy when there's lack of funding, When there's more funding, you can hire more teachers, smaller classes, more attention to students. You can have more resources, right? The list goes on. So I think just a school system in general, right, depending on where you are, that's a problem. Another issue, I think, is just we can't agree on a curriculum, right? Common Core has failed. The curriculums prior, not very good, right? What are we doing wrong? I mean, that's an entirely different issue, but these are just some things to think about, right? So I think it's less important to focus on why the issue is there, and let's just fix it. Who cares, right? If it's not going to be essay writing, it's going to be something else, right? Let's stop focusing our energy on where the problem came from, and let's just fix it. Obviously, it's also very important to think about where the problems are coming from so you can prevent future problems, but it doesn't seem like we're ever going to be able to fix that, right? So we just have to change our ways as teachers and just become better teachers, because these problems are always going to be there. And if we can stop them before they do too much damage, I think that's more impactful than trying to completely eradicate and change our curriculum and public school systems, right? What's more likely? Teachers being better and more well-equipped to teach things, or changing the school system, right? Going through bureaucracy is not easy and impossible and just dumb, right? So I think it's silly and trivial to focus on that and a waste of time. So if we can just become better teachers and learn from one another, and if there's students watching this, right, you just listen to how to write essays better. You don't even have to worry about why the issue's there. You're just doing better in general, right? So one of the biggest things I think plaguing students' essay writing is that there's just no time to focus on the minutia of essay, writing in general, right? When I edit someone's essay, it takes me an hour minimum, right, to read a 3-page essay, because I'm sitting there, I'm analyzing each sentence. I'm seeing how it fits in the context of the whole essay. I'm seeing if everything relates back to the thesis. I'm checking grammar. I mean, it's impossible. If you have 150 essays to read, you don't want to sit there and spend an hour on each when you're outside of your 40 plus hours in the classroom, right? So I really feel like that's an issue, right? A big one. And essay, just they take time they took time to write. They took time to read the book, to formulate the ideas, to write the essay, right? It's a months and months long process. You can't just read it in a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I sometimes have to read a paragraph 4 times to understand what the student was trying to say. Not because necessarily their writing was bad, but when I've read 100 essays, my brain's goop and fried, right? So I have to, give each essay the same attention. The first essay you read and the last one is not getting the same attention, right? The minutia that is there, that you have to really understand, analyze, just you don't have the time for, right? So how do we fix that? I think there's 2 underlying issues that nobody seems to discuss. I've never heard a teacher talk about this. Honestly, in all my research, all my experience, I've never seen these 2 issues come up, right? So the first one being, I think teachers overwhelm their students with what's wrong in their essay. And I'll get more into how to solve this in future videos, right? But what I've noticed is that grammar's bad thesis, no transitions, didn't explain your ideas well, can't use quotes, and they'll say all of that on an essay. And I know I'm sounding like, of course you have to do that, right? You have to let your students know, but do you, right? And I pose the idea that you're overwhelming your student by telling them that there's so much wrong with an essay. And that's because when you tell your student that you have 95 things wrong, they don't know where to begin, right? Okay, do I work on my grammar? Do I work on my thesis? Do I work on this? Do I work on that, right? If you listed all these things wrong with an essay and then gave them, okay, work on this, then work on this, that would at least be a little bit better. But I've never seen a teacher do that. They just say, sentence fragment, incomplete idea, didn't quote right? And then when I read an essay, like if I'm a student and when I was a student and I got my essays back and I saw that, I was so discouraged, right? Which leads me to my second point, is that that creates discouraged and uninterested students who feel like essay writing is this daunting thing they'll never be able to be good at, and they never get good at it. They never try because there's too much, right? They get overwhelmed. We know what it's like to be overwhelmed. You got 93 things to do on your Saturday, and you get overwhelmed and you end up doing nothing, right? It's the same thing with an essay. It's no different. So I find that that's a big issue. And I'm not going to go into how I handle that just yet. That'll be a future video. But I think if we can navigate that issue better, then you create, at the very least, you create less overwhelmed students, right? And what I propose is focusing on maybe one or two issues at first. And I've noticed this is very helpful. I've been an essay tutor, I guess you could call it, right? I've sort of found myself as an essay tutor. And what I do is I focus on one or two issues. That's solved, I moved on to the next ones, right? Because in one essay, if there's an issue, it's probably going to be there in all the subsequent ones after, right? So you know that it's going to continually be there. So if you fix one or two issues, then you go to the next two, and then you go on the next two. It's way less daunting than trying to have a kid do all of it at once, right? So by focusing on one or two at a time, they can really hone in their skills, fix that issue, and then you move on to the next one, right? And I think that creates far less disinterested students, because when you start getting higher grades, essay writing makes more sense to you, then you're just gonna be more motivated to do it, right? I think it's as simple as that. Because you're like, oh, I'm gonna write this essay, but I'm gonna do bad anyway, so it doesn't even matter, right? It's not like that at all. You're like, oh, I actually have a fighting chance, so let me actually put in some work because I might actually do well, right? And the whole perspective of the student switches just by that simple change, right, in perspective. So I think as teachers, if we can focus on a few issues at once rather than all of them, which seems counterproductive, but I really don't think it is. I think in my experience, it's worked opposite. Then you actually create stronger essay writers because you give each issue more attention, right? And I think in turn, as a byproduct, the student doesn't give up. The last thing I want to bring forth, and all of these things I'm talking about will each get videos on their own in this series. This is going to be a long series, but I think it's going to be a very useful and helpful one. And I'm going to keep it very brief. Not brief. I'm going to keep it short and to the point, right? I'm just going to explain my ideas in the simplest way possible. I don't want essay writing to feel like this thing that no one can do and you got to be a scholar. Nothing like that. It's just going to be, here's how we do it. Boom, boom, boom. And that's that, right? And we'll see that in future videos. So the last thing I want to say is small mini lessons. One mini lesson on how to write a thesis for 20 minutes is not enough. You got to provide examples and give them context, right? They have to be graded on it. They have to have that stress. When they're under pressure like that, that's when you see their true work, right? So you have to work from there. You can't just be like, let's write transitionary sentences as a practice worksheet and then expect that to carry over into their essay writing. You can use that as a tool, but it can't be the only thing, right? You have to use what they wrote in the essay as the example and then go from there, because that's where they're actually learning, because that's their words. It was their thought, right? There was a whole train of thought with everything going. It was a connection of ideas. It's in the context of something, right? It's not just a transitionary sentence that has no relevance to anything, right? So if we work from their actual essay as the example and we can put it into context to the whole essay, I think it sticks more, right? So that's sort of my thoughts on why essay writing is the issue it is now, right? I'm going to get into my solutions in the next videos, right? So stay tuned, and hope you guys enjoy and find this useful. Thanks for watching.